Hi, this is Liz from No Trace, and today I'm going to show you how to sew up these super cute snack and sandwich bags. So let's go ahead and get started. The fabric that I use is 100% organic cotton, and I have my pieces already cut right here. This cotton is a lightweight quilter's cotton, or poplin it's sometimes called. You could also use canvas, one layer of canvas and one layer of a lightweight material. That also would work really well, a cotton canvas, or if you have like a hemp material. Basically any natural fiber will work really nicely for this project. I don't tend to use nylon or any of those water resistant materials because when they're all worn out, they're hard to deal with. So there's not a lot of recycling options for those synthetic materials, and all natural fibers, when they're totally worn out, you can just compost them if you don't have fabric recycling near you. So I stick with all natural materials that aren't going to leave any kind of trace behind. The other supplies you're going to need are measuring tape or a ruler, some cotton thread or whatever thread you have, scissors, a chopstick or a pencil with an eraser, and pins. So let's go ahead and get started. Step 1 is to cut your fabric to size. The smaller bags I make at 5.5 inches wide and 9 inches long, and then the sandwich size bags I make at 8 inches wide and 18 inches long. So that's you can cut from exactly half of a yard is 18 inches, and you can get about 5 of these panels from 1/2 yard of fabric. So you could use the same fabric for both sides, and then you would be able to make 2.5 bags out of a 1/2 yard of fabric. Or if you have 2 different fabrics, cut each to 1/2 yard or 18 inches, and then you'll be able to get about 5 bags made. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through how to do this with just one size, with the snack bag size, but it's the same steps for the sandwich bag side. So I'm going to set this aside for now. So the first step is to line up your 2 pieces of fabric with the right sides facing each other. Now this fabric doesn't really have a right side or a wrong side, but just pick a side, and then obviously my outer fabric does have a right side, so go ahead and line those up, right sides facing. And now you're going to take your pins and pin in a few spots. So you don't need a ton of pins, this isn't a huge amount of material, but you do want to pin in a few spots so it doesn't move around too much while you're trying to sew it. Now once you've got your pins all the way around, you're going to want to go back and measure out an opening on one of your long sides that's about 3 inches wide. Okay, this is where you're going to not sew over so that you can turn your bag right side out later. Okay, so mark off 3 inches with your pins, and you're going to not sew that opening. You could also use tailor's chalk or a pen and just mark where you want to leave it open. So now I'm going to take this over to my machine, and I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around all 4 sides, leaving this opening open, so not sewing over this gap. I'm going to make sure to back stitch when you start and stop, and then when you get all the way around here, you're going to back stitch again when you start and stop. Alright, so you're going to be sewing with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I usually set my stitch length a little bit longer. And you want to remember to back stitch and then go around. Oops. Okay. I just cut my thread on accident, so I am backing up, going over it again. It's one of the tricks with these machines with a lot of bells and whistles. Okay, and once you get to the end, you start and stop, couple back stitches, and then you've gone all the way around. So now that you've sewn all around your snack bag, what I like to do is trim off the corners before I turn it right side out. So just take your scissors and trim up to the stitches, but make sure you don't cut through the stitches. And this will help you get a nice clean corner when you turn it right side out. So go ahead and push the fabric through the opening. And this is where I like to use a chopstick, or you could use a pencil, the eraser side of a pencil, and just gently get those corners pressed out. All four corners. I've seen some folks take a needle and actually work on this to get it even crisper, so they'll use a little pin to try to get a super crisp corner. I generally don't do that because it's kind of a lot of effort. But if you are making something really, really special, you could do that. Okay. At this point, you probably want to give it a nice press with the iron so that it'll be easier to sew it up. So I'm going to take this over to my iron and I'm going to press it so that we have nice crisp edges to work with. Alright, so I've gone ahead and ironed my bag so that I have a nice, more crisp edges to work on next. And we're almost done with our little snack bag. The next step is optional. You can skip it if you want to, but if you want to give your bag more of a polished look, think about adding a row of stitching, top stitching on one of these ends. So the end that you put the top stitching on is going to be the part of your bag that's going to be folded over. So for this bag, I'm going to have this edge of my fabric folded over on the bag when it's all done. So this is the side that I want to put a little stitching on. And if I wanted this flap to be folded over, I would put this stitching here instead of on this end. If you have some kind of a directional print, you know, like flowers with stems or animals, there's a right side, there's a wrong side, make sure that you figure that out before you take this over to top stitch and top stitch the flap. That will be like this. Okay, so I'm going to take this to my machine, top stitch here, and I'll be right back. I'm back. You can see that I've added stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the edge on the edge that I'm going to fold over on the outside of my bag. So now we are at the last step. So flip your bag over, fold up the bottom, fold down the top, and you might want to grab your tape measure, but you want your bag to be about 4 inches in height. That gives a nice amount of overlap between the inner flap and the outer flap so that your little snacks are less likely to fall out from the bag. So you want it to be about 4 inches. So fold it over so that you reach that height. So it ends up being, this is folded up about 3 inches, the bottom flap, and then this is folded down, I think that's about 2 inches. Yeah, about 2 inches. Okay. And you might want to put a couple pins in here. So this is where the opening is that we turned the bag right side out. And so you might want to put a pin in there just so you go carefully and slowly over that spot and you capture all of the layers of fabric. And you could also put a pin just to keep your flap down, keep it from flopping around on you, and then a pin on this side as well. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this over to the machine. I'm going to stitch along this side, making sure to do some back stitch at the start and some back stitch at the end. And then I'm going to do this side, back stitch at the start and go all the way down, back stitch at the end. Now you're going to want to take your time, get close to the edge, but making sure that you get all of your layers of fabric. Okay? So it'll probably end up being about 1/4 inch seam allowance so that I make sure I'm getting all those layers in my stitching. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the machine and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. So I've gone ahead and stitched up the sides with about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I checked to make sure that I caught all my layers of fabric, and it looks good. And the other thing I like to check is just to flip it open, peek inside, and make sure everything is connected on the inside too. And then the last step is to trim off all your little loose threads. I like to use smaller scissors for this step just because they're easier to handle, but really just whatever scissors you have is fine. And get all those last little threads. Almost done. I'm just going to do this last little thread here, and here. And you can set those little threads aside. These little bits of threads you can add to your compost if you have a compost. I actually collect all my little threads and tiny fabric scraps, and they become stuffing in some of my cushions and bean bags and things like that. So, but yeah, do whatever you want with those. But I do encourage people to not send these little cotton bits to the landfill. Oh, it looks like I missed a thread here. Okay, so it's done. I am going to go through all these steps again with my other fabric to make a sandwich bag in the same way, but I'm going to skip that part and just show you the finished product. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've sewn up the larger bag, the sandwich size bag as well, following the same steps I did for the snack bag. And one thing I want to point out is that when you're trying to finish fold this bag, I folded the top flap to about 3 inches. So this is 3 inches right here. And I folded up the bottom flap to about 6 inches. And then that gives you a finished bag that's just about 8 inches. And that's a good size for sandwiches, popcorn, grapes, a pastry. And you want to check that you've got all your fabric caught in your seam. And then you're done. These make awesome little gifts for the holidays. We use them in our lunches all the time, and even just when we're traveling and on the go, they might store small things in our luggage, and they're 100% cotton and washable and compostable when they're all worn out. So thanks so much for watching this video, and if you can, give it a thumbs up. Bye.